Hello everyone and welcome to the Showdown. It is now noon. Lindsey is out on assignment this week, so Jarrod is joining us. Jarrod, welcome.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for joining us today. So coming up on today's show, we finally get to see Jarrod Fridey's trip to Welcome to Thornbury for the latest Latrobe Student Union event.
And we also sat down to have a look at a really interesting Netflix documentary called Les Bleus, and Ahmed and Mitch will be joining us later on to talk about how the French national team and politicals all intertwine. But first, Liam Connors with the news.
Thanks, Jarrod and Peter. Last night, Education Minister Simon Birmingham disclosed changes to the budget that will take place next week. Student fees will rise by 1.8% next year and will continue to rise by a staggering total of 7.5% by 2021. In Canberra, the minister said the new policy was quite measured, quite modest and quite balanced. University students can expect to pay up to an extra $3,600 under the new changes. The minister explained the most expensive course, a 6-year medical degree, will result in a maximum student fees of $75,000, while taxpayers will still pay $137,000 in fees. There will also be a drop in the repayment threshold for HECS help loans to $42,000. However, the plan outlines that there will be no cuts to research or other taxpayer contributions. The maximum a student will pay over a 4-year degree is $50,000, and an assigned $37 million a year from January 2029 for postgraduate scholarships that students can use at institutes of their own choice. The federal government expects these changes to save almost $3 billion over a 4-year period. In other news, an Adelaide woman has been arrested in Colombia after she was found in possession of almost 6 kilograms of cocaine in her luggage. Cassandra Sainsbury's family described her as naive, possibly facing up to 25 years in prison. The mother of the 22-year-old Adelaide woman said that her daughter was given a package wrapped in black plastic on the day of her departure. The package was then placed in the luggage by Cassandra, thinking that it was a set of headphones she was planning on using as a gift. The mother said that Cassandra was naive in not opening the package to make sure the contents was what she assumed it to be. The family has reached out to the community through crowdsourcing funding to help pay for her legal expenses. Ms. Sainsbury is being held in Colombia's largest all-female prison after being denied bail. Her trial is to take place within 2 months. Now back to the show with you, Jarrod and Peter.
Thanks, Liam. Okay, so first up, Liam, Hugh Martin is a lecturer of journalism at Latrobe and is now also head of operations for planning at ABC Regional. And Lindsey Martin has spoken to Hugh about what it means to be a regional journalist and maybe a few tips for us trying to go into the field very soon.
I've got to say that regional journalists in the ABC are probably the most multi-skilled group of journalists, if not in the country, then certainly within the ABC. My name is Hugh Martin and I'm the Head of Operations Planning for ABC Regional, which encompasses all of our regional stations around the country. So our regional reporters do a whole range of things. We have program makers who spend some of their time on air, producing radio and presenting radio shows. We have news reporters whose job is to go out and gather news stories, attend events, to film and record for radio and television. And we have people working largely on social media and digital stories and digital productions for the websites and social media channels around the country. We're in the process of hiring a whole lot of new people for regional ABC, and the new focus or the new emphasis on reporting in regional Australia is really now very much more about video and video for digital, but also for TV news and broadcast radio where possible. So our focus is to say, we cover all of regional Australia. We tell stories about what's happening in regional Australia, and we are aiming to do more of that visually than has previously been the case for regional ABC, which has a tradition of radio. Like any journalism job, you're looking for people that are curious about what's going on around them, who are willing to go out and meet people and interview people and think about issues, who have got some good technical expertise or skill, or willing to learn and ability to learn technical skills. My view has always been that you can't know everything there is to know about the tools and the technology that you work with, not least because it changes quite quickly. But you've got to be not afraid to learn and not afraid to get in there and pick up a new tool and learn how to work it. But I think the other thing which is really important is that you need to be someone who wants to go and live in a regional part of the country, and who's open to the opportunities and the challenges and the exciting prospect of being in some of the most beautiful landscape in the world, but dealing with some real characters, finding some of the stories that that help define the Australian identity, and tell those stories to a national audience, because you've got an opportunity in the ABC not just to tell stories to the community that you live in, which is the starting point and an absolutely crucial one, but then to take those stories to a national audience through the national broadcasts, programs on television and radio and digital. There is a pathway that you could imagine yourself going from as a junior reporter in regional Australia, moving back to a capital city news or into a capital city newsroom, and then with that combination of experience really being in a position to put your hand up and become a foreign correspondent anywhere in the world. So there's a great training ground in regional Australia for all journalists. There are 44 regional stations in remote and rural Australia, and they range from Katherine in the north, Northern Territory, down to Burnie and Launceston in northern Tasmania, and from Lismore in the east coast of Australia across to Karratha and Broome in the west, and down to Bunbury and Albany in southwest Australia, and all places in between. In a small community, you can't always tell good stories. Sometimes you have to tell tough stories, and that's a challenge, but that is a really valuable skill to learn as a journalist. And identifying where the boundaries are and how to walk them is something that will hold you in good stead as your career progresses. But I think really that there's nothing better than taking that first step outside of a capital city, leave your home nest and the safety, the comfort zone that you know so well, and get out there and take the chance and put your hand up. I think one of the things that we've got a lot of jobs being advertised at the moment. They're not all entry level. Some of them are senior positions. And that also is a message, because what we want to be saying to journalists of all career stages is you can make a living and make a life in regional journalism. You don't have to just think about it as an entry point or somewhere that you can learn skills to then take to a capital city newsroom or a foreign correspondent posting, but you can live in that community and you can progress through your career and you can make a life there, and that's something that's really important too. So it's got a number of different aspects to it, and it starts with wanting to be part of that tradition of telling Australian stories.
Well, that was a really great package to see how many jobs there are for budding journalists such as ourselves. We finish at the end of the year, so it'd be good to see that there are job opportunities for us.
Exactly right. Now, I've introduced this story on several occasions with massive fails, so I'm going to let you introduce this story.
Okay. Now
hopefully it works.
I've got it on good authority that it will work this time. So are you looking for a break from studying? The Latrobe Student Union organises events throughout the year to give students an opportunity to just unwind and relax. Our correspondent, Jarrod Fridey, headed down to the most recently organised event at Welcome to Thornbury to see what went down.
Hey guys, Jarrod here for Latrobe Live. We're down here at Latrobe Student Union's Welcome to Thornbury party, where everyone's having some food, getting some drinks. We've got some free currency for tonight, so you can have free snacks, and we're just getting around it.
So my name's Gab. I'm the Activities Officer for the Latrobe Student Union, and basically my job is to make sure that all the students have a good time, and it's not all about schoolwork at all times. It is good to study, but it is also a good thing to have fun. So my main job is to make sure that we hold the best parties for everyone at the union, and that everyone gets the best out of their university experience. I guess basically we want all the students just to have a really good time, and even at those periods where, you know, uni work is getting everyone down, you've got a lot of assignments due, mid-semester exams and those sort of things, it's nice just to come out and have a night like this, be able to kick back, have a few drinks and have something to eat and socialise with one another and maybe meet some new people within the uni as well.
It's a really great, adding on that, I think it's just a really great opportunity to get involved with the local university community and, you know, really promote the fact that, you know, there's so many different people out there, so many different degrees that are within the uni. So, you know, it's about bringing everyone together and making sure that everyone's included.
Yeah, it's good. It's good doing something else and getting out of the house sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a good break from uni and work and shit.
Cheeky couple of frothies.
Location's perfect, right on the tram line.
Yeah, it's good on the old 86. Should they do it again? Yeah, definitely.
Hell yeah.
That's all that needs to be included in the deal. More free beer.
So the Student Union's a peak representative body of all students on Latrobe University. So we run a whole bunch of services and activities around the uni, and which include advocacy, free barbecues, free food, and awesome events like this one here. We also provide a free legal service, free advocacy services, and a lot of free events just around uni. So, you know, it's there to prop you up when you need to. It's there to catch you when you fall back. It's there. The union's just there to represent you and help you out as much as possible.
What do I take most out of events like these? I'll be satisfied if all I leave with is getting to meet you and look into this lens. It's a beautiful lens, and eat a damn good meal. Hell yeah.
It's such a great place to go, just to chill, and you know, all the food trucks that you're spoiled for choice basically.
Yeah, no, I've never been there, so I might have to check it out now.
Definitely a must do. Coming up, we'll have a look at the new NBL Combine, and also there's another episode of the show reel. But first, over the break, we sat down and watched the Netflix documentary Les Bleus, which looked at the way the national soccer team is pretty much how French society mirrors that national soccer team. And Ahmed and Mitch join us on the desk to discuss it, guys.
Hey, guys. Hey.
Ahmed, do you want to give us a bit of a rundown of what the documentary actually is?
The documentary kind of like looks at the last 20 years of like French football and how the French national team has mirrored a feeling of French society. So, for example, right before the myth, so the myth of the black blanc Iber, the black-white Arab, sort of the reforming of French society, this symbol of sort of French multiculturalism, there was this initial sort of worry, what is the ethnic makeup of the French national team? And it coincided with this terrorist attack that happened in France in the mid-90s with this French-Algerian man at the centre of it. And the only Algerian person of Algerian descent in the national team was Zinedine Zidane. So before the Euro 96, everyone's like, oh, is this guy French? Is he really with us? Is he going to be like a halfway house sort of thing? And there was all these discussions about national identity. That sort of Jean-Marie Le Pen, the father of Marie Le Pen, who's running for the French elections in the next few weeks, was at the centre of kind of like questioning that identity and the national identity at that point. And then we know the World Cup happens.
Yeah. And that was such a big event for France, and you could see, like in the documentary, the cheers and the emotion after the World Cup. Everyone seemed united, and like France, you would think would be a united country after that.
Sure, and sort of this is where the black blanc Iber, the black white Arab sort of narrative begun. This team of French society, what it looks like in 1998, was there. And I was talking to Mitch beforehand, and you picked up on something in the documentary that was said by the current president.
President Francois Hollande. Yeah, he said that really the sport was evolving faster than society itself. And France, I've seen over like the past 2 decades, which is how what the documentary encaptures. France is a country full of diversity, and that whole football team and the country looking at that blue, white, and red was in that myth of black, white, and Arab. And it was really like during that early 2000s, it was looking at strength. But through the last decade, it's the diversity has almost become their weakness in a way.
Yeah, and one of the things I took out of it was that, especially I think it's more in America and some of the Australian sports at the moment, there was obviously a big American election last year, and a lot of sports stars from a heap of different sports had something to say, whether it be good about the current president or bad. They always had an opinion, but there was always that kind of that thought from the outside that why should sports people have opinions about politics? Don't force your opinions on everyone. But you watch this documentary, and the French national team was put on a pedestal, and they were the face of like politics.
Yeah, they became the symbol.
They were superstars in France and all over the world, during that time.
And there was a point where they went to South Africa to meet Nelson Mandela, who was normally visits to Nelson Mandela were reserved for the heads of state, and you're sending your soccer team as that representative. So,
and I guess it kind of like it was like this. Obviously, Nelson Mandela represents this point of history that we are going towards an anti-racist movement, and this French national team is the embodiment of that and how that happens in society. And then they come together and they become this major symbol, and there's all this pressure in that team to be all of these things, when in reality a lot of them are mid-20s, early 30s, young men who get involved in football when they're in their teens, mid-teens, and stay in football, and that encompasses their entire life. A lot of them don't necessarily finish school or anything like that, and they're tasked to sort of represent things that they might not even understand themselves.
Yeah, and move on from the 98 World Cup, where they obviously won and Zidane was hailed as a hero. Talk about now what happened after the 9/11 attacks and how kind of the French national team went from the heroes to public enemy number one in France.
Oh yeah, because like the strangest thing is they pick one of the most the country they have one of the most fraught histories with, Algeria, to play right after 9/11 in a friendly match. And France's national makeup is really diverse, and where they play the game in the Stade de France, in the surrounding areas, there's a large Algerian, North African population, and the game felt more like in the documentary, one of the Algerian players, Mahdi Marini, was like he said, Thierry just came to me quietly and said, this is a home match for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was just going to say that would have been good in a way, that they've united again. It would have shown a bit of that.
But that's the problem again, is that they've used this team to heal like wounds that are hundreds of years old, like the 40 years after the Algerian War, independence movements. Like, this team is not equipped to handle history of colonialism and all that entails. And it was sort of like in my opinion, I think the French Football Federation was naive to think this team could do that. And then in the game, Zidane becomes this symbol of look at you, you're not, what are you? Are you French? Are you Algerian? The Algerian fans are booing him because I thought you were one of us. And then there was this really interesting moment where they were talking about in the documentary when the pitch invasion happens and everyone is smiling, and everyone's just, why are they smiling? And Mehdi Marini said, so there's something that was really interesting to me. He said they wanted to show that they existed, and he kind of took the economy of how when they win the World Cup, the same people that are probably doing the pitch invasion were holding up the French flag and the Algerian flag side by side, and then this narrative of Black Blanc Uber comes out, and it becomes a very sort of rigid idea of identity when some of them feel French, Algerian, and etc.
Just give us a bit of a rundown on that pitch invasion. What actually happened? Like whenabouts in the match, and why?
First, it's one guy comes out, another person comes out, and then it just erupts.
And these are all fans holding Algerian flags at that time. As you talked about just before, that when France won the World Cup, they had a French flag in one hand and an Algerian flag in the other hand. Now when it comes to the teams going off against each other, they're 100% Algerian.
Well, because I think it represented a mood in the country at the time, the sort of the Le Pen sort of, are you really French? And that discussion about French identity in this rigid box of Black Bloc, Iber, and then it just erupting. And then, I think that part about showing they wanted to exist, but not also understanding what that pitch invasion could represent as well.
Yeah. And Mitch, Zinedine Zidane is a huge figure. He's like a god in France, basically. Yeah. How much of an influence did he have? There was a lot of pressure on him just as being a soccer player, but then also as a political, mentor, figure as well. He would have been pretty big.
Yeah, well, you see on the documentary following the World Cup win, they were all chanting Zidane for president. So he's obviously this big symbol for both countries, especially. His parents grew up in Algeria, and it is really his homeland, he likes to say. But in the same sense, he does have to represent France at the same time. He's this huge symbol, and he's that symbol of diversity that France represents, I guess. But then you look at that post 9/11 era,
but really, also the tensions.
Yeah, and 9/11 just brought in the climate of global fear throughout the world, and obviously that's going to change everyone's views on diversity itself. And is it for the best or?
Yeah, and Zidane, it was the big figure. Then he went kind of game number one, and then the 2006 World Cup happened.
The fall.
And it was one of the biggest moments in French. I remember I was probably 8 years old or 10 years old, and I was watching that game, the World Cup final, where Zidane lost his cool at one of the Italian defenders and headbutted him flush in the chest and got a red card. And there were a couple of people in the documentary, a couple of French comedians and actors who said it almost felt like it almost felt like a suicide kind of thing, where he wanted to go out with a bang and
self-sabotaging sort of moment. Yeah, it was. I think one of them said that he didn't like Roman Domenech, and he sort of was like, I don't want you to win this World Cup. I've already won the World Cup.
Yeah.
But also, what's interesting is how, I guess, contrasting this sort of the reaction, sort of there's this universal forgiveness of what Zidane does, and then what happens right after that World Cup. And it's classified in the documentary as le chaos, chaos in terms of just what happens in 2010 World Cup, and how they're seen as these deplorables, these people that don't care about the shirt, and then it becomes almost extremely Mitch says, their diversity becomes the target of whether they're French enough, and the language that Nicolas Sarkozy, the president during this time, uses of we're going to clean up these dirty streets, these low lives are going to get out, and Lilian Thuram, guy that pretty much helped France win the World Cup, is I come from these suburbs as well, am I a low life? And that kind of conversation was interesting.
Yeah, you talk about Laurent Blanc, who came in as the new national coach and wanted to make all of the players sing the anthem and try to make the team united again. But then there was the undercover recording of him supporting a quota of players from African descent who could play on the team.
Yeah, the dual national thing, It was... What's interesting about that is it goes back to the myth, the Black Blanc-Ibeur, this guy, this centre-back of the 98 World Cup, he represents, and that team represents French a society at its best, and he's a part of this movement. The idea was he's going to fix up the team, and then he becomes almost this figure of sort of like breaking of that myth. And he's not only asking for quotas and for dual nationals, he's also in the recording talks about black players in a very negative kind of light, which was also interesting because then there was all this backlash that came after that. The people that he played with, like Leon Thuram, Patrick Vieira, Thierry, it just becomes this very like visceral moment. And this is all before Euro 2012, and it erupts there again.
Yeah. And then you go to just last year, Euro 2016 was held in France, and it was a big event for the country. But there were terror attacks in the months leading up. There was obviously one during friendly with Germany, was it?
Yeah.
And
at the Stade de France.
Yeah, and there was that one, and one of the players, Lassana Diarra, his cousin, was tragically killed, and Antoine Griezmann, one of the star strikers, his sister was very lucky to get out of the Bataclan theatre alive. And do you think now, after the Euro, they will obviously runners up to Portugal, do you think there's a sense of unity now after what's happened?
But that's the conclusion that the documentary makes. I think, do you know those moments right after the terror attacks, particularly the Stade de France, right after that, the game after they played England, there was a really strong element of unity that I felt there. But I don't think... And this is the thing that this team, the issue with the French national team, is it can never be the thing that heals the ills of French society. It cannot take on this mantle of like this social justice mission that is done through government and sort of activism that they obviously can be a part of, but they cannot be the people that head this mission. And I feel the issue with the documentary is it perpetuates that in the very end. Yeah. And we look at the French elections and political system right now. What's interesting, in 2003, Marie Le Pen's dad gets into the runoff the final round, but loses...
I think 82%.
Yeah, 82%, like landslide loss. And now we're back at this. Like these situations mirror each other so well. Yeah. It's Marie Le Pen against Emmanuel Macron, the sort of like the new age leftist centrist, versus Marie Le Pen, the far right candidate, and like those two moments mirror each other so well. The French national team then was supposed to be this figure of cleansing the wounds, and now again they're this figure of cleansing the wounds in this attempt to stop the sort of the nationalist discussions, which again start with Marie Le Pen's father all the way back in the mid-90s about this ethnic. The ethnic makeup of the team. So it just kind of goes full circle right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and we could talk about this all day really, but we've just run out of time, guys. But thank you so much for joining us. So it's really interesting. If you do get a chance to watch it, it's definitely a documentary worth watching, that's for sure.
Yeah, and so over the break, we commemorated our fallen soldiers on ANZAC Day, and our reporter Adrianna Bodganovski decided to explore Melbourne's 1,000 Steps Memorial, and here's Adrianna's package.
Observed on the 25th of April each year, ANZAC Day was originally to honour the members of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps who fought at Gallipoli against the Ottoman Empire during World War I. With the coming of the Second World War, ANZAC Day became a day on which to commemorate the lives of Australians and New Zealanders lost in that war as well, and in subsequent years. The meaning of the day has been further broadened to include those killed in all military operations in which the countries have been involved. So what better way to come back from the ANZAC Day break than to take you on a journey along the 1,000 Steps Kokoda Memorial Track in Melbourne's Dandenong Ranges. Located within the Dandenong Ranges National Park, the 1,000 Steps Kokoda Walk is a unique and renowned tourist spot at Mount Dandenong. The Kokoda Track is a beautiful walking track with adjacent forest areas, bushlands and various scenic points. Whilst visiting the steps, you will get a small glimpse into the physical effort experienced by the Australian soldiers during 1942. Created in the early 1900s, the 1,000 Steps was originally made from the trunks of tree ferns laid along the wetter areas of the track to make the 290 metre ascent somewhat easier. Plaques along the trail depict the lives of soldiers who fought and died on the real Kokoda Trail in Papua New Guinea during World War II. According to Park Victoria's Park Note, they represent the Golden Staircase, a name given by Australian soldiers to the 2,000 steps cut by the Australian Army engineers and the others into the track between Uberi and Imata Ridge. The 1,000 Steps Walk has become an institution for fitness enthusiasts across Melbourne, making the 3-kilometre trek one of the most popular spots in the Dandenong Ranges National Park. But its steep terrain is not to be underestimated. So if you're up for a hike and burning a couple of 100 calories, or just want to pay tribute and visit the memorial, the 1,000 Steps is open 7 days a week and is only a 50-minute drive from the CBD. Oh, and don't let the name fool you. There are only 776 steps.
It's tick past 12:30 and Liam's joining us again for the headlines. Thanks, Liam.
Thanks again, guys. Yesterday, a toddler was tragically killed in a collision with a car in Ballarat. The toddler was playing outside a shed on a farming property when he was struck by a car driven by his father. The investigation is ongoing, but police believe the vehicle was reversing when the toddler walked into the path of the moving vehicle. In more news, Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews said today's state budget would include an allocated $11.5 million security upgrade at government buildings. This comes after police arrested a man on the roof of Government House yesterday in Melbourne. The incident was described as a major security breach. Marie will have more on the state budget when it is released at 1 p.m. during 1300. In recent news, today it has been confirmed by the federal government that the proposed second airport for Sydney will be funded by the government. The Western Sydney Airport project will cost the government an estimated $5 billion. This comes as a result of the Sydney Airport Group rejecting the government's offer of taking on the project. The Sydney Airport Group replied to the government saying that the project was not in the best interests for its shareholders. Minister for Urban Infrastructure, Paul Fletcher, said that the Western Sydney Airport is very important to build and the government has a clear plan to do it. That's all for today's headlines. Back to the show.
Thanks for that, Liam.
Thanks, Liam.
Well, we have a whopper of a sports show for you today, so let's get into it. So over the break, myself, Peter and Mitch Keating went out to the NBL Combine to have a look at all the hopefuls hoping to get a spot on one of the NBL lists this season. So here's the story.
Clubs are all here in force, which is great. We've got some extremely talented and well-experienced head coaches sitting just behind us, and I think from the comments I've been getting, they've been impressed by the talent on offer as well. Already I've heard mentions of a number of kids who would look good in particular uniforms, so hopefully those rumours become reality.
Really impressed, I guess, when you come in here just with the professionalism of the event, the way it's been run and organised, and it just has a really good feel about it, I think, and that just continues to reflect the standards that are set by the NBL. And over this last couple of years, when they do things, they do it right and they do it well. And I think it's appropriate that the players who've come here have been treated in that manner and given the respect that they deserve to come in, and gives them an opportunity to be successful as well and put on, I guess, the best show that they can for all the coaches that are here.
So it's just a fantastic showcase of our sport, and that opportunity for the two national programs to work together. I think it's we can't wait for next year's one whilst we're still in day 2, and this one's yet to finish.
India's a huge growth market for basketball. Obviously, you've got much more established markets like China and the Philippines, who are aware of what we're doing today and have already started discussions with us about ensuring that there are, in particular, a number of Chinese players competing or contesting the Combine next season. There's a number of commercial operators running tournaments in China to identify who those people will be, which is a really exciting prospect for us to become a bit of a catchment for the best young talent from all around Asia in particular.
I saw a lot of the young Indian kids at the NBA Asian camp they had last year, and they had a handful there, a couple of big kids. I think that they're still not a fair way away, and they're not quite as advanced as some of the other parts of the world. But it's any country where it's, what are they, 1.5 billion, 1.6 billion people? Anywhere there's something of that type of numbers, you've got to pay attention to, because sheer weight of numbers says that there's bound to be a few there that are going to be okay. So their basketball programs have been emerging for quite some time, but they're still a fair way off a lot of the other parts of the world.
Well, I think what it does for the sport is actually shows that pathway piece. So when you've got an elite, globally recognised program like Centre of Excellence, coming together with the NBL, which is one of the best leagues, outside of the NBA in the world, and getting better, it's that fantastic synergy of being able to get the groups of athletes together, show what they can do, and it's going to raise the standard of competition in years to come.
I think it's one of those things as the NBL coaching group, we just need to be mindful that the talent level of the young players coming through, in particular those ones that have been identified to go to the Centre of Excellence, and I think they can come in many cases and contribute to the NBL right away. If not in the first year, certainly by year 2. And I think as an NBL coaching group, we need to be prepared to give them some opportunities. Otherwise, we just lose them all to the States, and they all go to college. And that, from a national team perspective, isn't always the best development pathway for them. So I think as the NBL, if we can continue to give them development pathways here and give them opportunities to play, we'll be pleasantly surprised by what they can deliver, and will continue to raise the standard of the league. And this is a legitimate pathway now for these kids to make the NBA.
I think that there's the pathways are becoming a lot more defined, and certainly not just with this, but also with the Seabull competition, with the kids that are coming out of the college ranks. There's a variety of different ways for pathways for which players can end up in the NBL, but something like this is just an extra thing that you get to see some of the guys that are maybe playing in the Big V or playing in state leagues around the country or playing in the Seabull, and get another look at them in a different environment, and also for some of the guys here with the imports as well. So last year Jeremy Kendall came through, was at the Combine, and he found out his way onto a roster. So it's tough because we don't have enough spots. There needs to be more teams in the NBL. There's a lot of talent here that deserve the opportunity to play in the NBL, but unfortunately there's limited opportunities.
I think it's really important that all of the major stakeholders are working together to demonstrate pathway. The reality of the situation is we don't govern junior basketball and never will. And at the same time, Basketball Australia need to be able to demonstrate that there's pathway from what they do to what we do at a professional competition level, and then again, pathway from there into the national team. So it has to be a symbiotic relationship. This is an event that Basketball Australia, Basketball Victoria, the Players Association, the ABA and the NBL have all worked to put on together, and I think it will continue that way for good reason for a long time.
Showtime!
And Mitch joins us now to have a bit of a chat about the package. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, we saw the likes of Gaze and Lamanis at the Combine. Who else was there, and how many players were there that turned out?
So the NBL CEO, Jeremy Loyler, was there. He was happy. He came in the end of the second day and was pretty, obviously you saw in the package, was pretty happy to see so many athletes. I think there were about 80 in total. A few coming back from college in America, a few staying from Big V through Victoria, and all across Australia, as well as the 4 international Indian athletes who put on quite a show as well.
Yeah, it's such a good pathway for players in Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's the second year now that they've brought in the combine is mirroring like the NBA does. They don't have the draft yet, obviously. They're just picking up through free agency. But I think it's the best way for the league at the moment.
Yeah, and I think Andrew Gay's, in the story we saw, he mentioned Jeremy Kendall, who found his way onto a list last season and was really impressive. And I think it's good to see that there is that pathway because obviously we don't have a college system like America do, so there's no real way for Australian players to go professional straight out of high school or whatever. So yeah, it is really good to see that there is kind of that option for players. They don't have to go to America and go to college there. They can just stay in Australia and play basketball here.
And like they said in the story, where the NBL CEOs, that they will never control junior basketball, but it's good that Basketball Australia are getting on board and they're able to merge and do this combine, which is, gives a reason for the Aussies to stay at home.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the NBL isn't a bad competition. It's not. It's not as good as the NBA, but it's still a half decent competition compared to the other ones around the world.
Certainly, yeah. I think the combine's one of those steps in making the NBL closer to the NBA. Obviously, it's not going to. It's obviously a long-term thing to get our status as well as America's, but I think it's certainly a big step forward.
And now to basketball in the States. Round 1 of the playoffs has finished, and we've seen a few surprises, but however, LeBron James and his Cavs and Steph Curry and his Golden State Warriors are just getting the job done and dominating. Mitch, who stood out to you so far, and have the results changed your predictions?
No, I think it's still going to be the Cavs versus Warriors in the finals. I think both teams were the only sweeps for the first round, and I think they're coming off pretty fresh legs into round 2. But my standout for round 1 will be John Wall.
John Wall on the floor for Washington, guarded by Hardaway. Hard screen, Morris. Wall gets himself to the rim, and a chance at
it's 5-on-4
in this over trying to get back.
Long time, which is not uncommon in Europe. Manu Ginobili, Tony, those guys are all pros for a while. Still putting on a little.
So so far, and even yesterday's game, he put on quite a show in their loss to Boston, but I think, he was quite a stand-up player in the fact that he lifted when it mattered.
And Washington's one of those teams that can also score very quickly as well. Like, they've got that defence as well, but they can also score very quickly with that backcourt. And, Wall, creating those opportunities with his passing.
Yeah, and Boston were my pick to come out of the Eastern Conference. I thought they might knock off the Cavs. They obviously took the long route to get to round 2.
Yeah.
But and Washington is a team that I'd be really scared about in this Eastern Conference. I think they're probably the underdog going in, and I think they could probably claim a scalp. They'll claim a couple of games off Boston, and
definitely
good. The series.
Definitely good. The MI Celtics got that first win on the board because that's all important, especially haven't winning a game at home in a while. But anyway, that a bit later on.
Well, one player that impressed me was Gordon Hayward. He led the Jazz to a 4-3 victory over the Clippers, knocking the Clippers out for the 5th year in a row. And you could go on forever about Chris Paul and what that means for his legacy, but Gordon Hayward was just a man that I think just took over this series. He had a lot of help from Joe Ingles and the like, but he was the man, and he has been in Utah for a couple of seasons, and he's really shining in that role. And I think they come against the Warriors now in the second round, so I think they're a genuine chance. They've got all the tools in their side to really take it up to the Warriors. They're a really good defensive side, and I think they'll take a couple of games off, if not the series.
Yeah, and Mitch, it's so good to see that a team like Utah that are in a smaller market are doing so well. Like, that's always good to see. It's like...
Yeah, absolutely. I think Gordon Hayward has definitely stepped up, and I think all their players, Joe Johnson, Joe Ingles, especially when Rudy Gobert went down in the first 20 seconds of the series, that those rotation players like we saw with Houston against OKC, it's not about the 1 or 2 stars in the team like Harden or your Westbrook in a case. Yeah, some players need that support, like Harden got from Nene and from Patrick Beverley. I think that. And a team like Utah, you have all these rotation players managing to step up in that fourth quarter. Joe Johnson especially. Joe Ingles is always there to represent Australia when it matters. And I think a team like Utah coming up against Golden State is going to be definitely tricky, but I think they're one of the teams that potentially could knock them off the
Just want to
throne.
touch on the Clippers quickly. Where to from here? Obviously their experiment's not working.
It's got to be over for the Clippers. I think it's... Well, you talk about they've had DeAndre Jordan. They signed him to an extension. They locked him in. They literally locked him into a house in the off season to make him sign an extension. And they've got Blake Griffin, who is a number 1 pick and who was a star of the league, and Chris Paul is as well. But they just obviously don't work together, and they just can't get out of the second round of the playoffs.
It's like they're missing that one piece, but
you don't know.
But
really
you
know
can't
what it
be
is.
missing that one piece for 5 years. You have to sort of work that out.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, but the player who stood out for me, guys, that comes as no surprise, was Isaiah Thomas. Tragically, he lost his 6th in a car accident during the round 1 playoffs. And he still played, and he's still an inspiration to that Celtics team. He's the little spiritual leader at that team. Being able to shoot the 3 and pass it off. He's just given Boston a little bit extra, especially going into the playoffs and and claiming that number 1 seed.
He does stuff that you shouldn't be allowed to do, especially at his height. He's 5'9". He just shouldn't be allowed to do that on a basketball court at that size, and it's incredible to see.
Well, looking at some of the stuff yesterday, Mitch, and some of the stuff that he was doing is how can you do that? You shouldn't be able to do that.
It's more of a circus act than a sports game at the moment for Isaiah Thomas. But he lost his tooth yesterday as well, which is quite interesting after an elbow from Otto Porter. But he didn't really seem to faze him. He still went out there, and I guess he won his team the game, and a healthy 1-0 lead going into game 2.
And they had their struggles, the Boston, in that first round against Chicago, losing the first 2 games at home. I don't think a Boston team had won a game at TD since, given the Bruins play there as well, the ice hockey team. They hadn't won a game there since until the Celtics won that game 5. I think it was game 5 there. So at least we've maybe got a bit of a home court advantage now.
Yeah, finally, and hope to go a long way in this playoff series. The rebuild went really quickly, it seemed, but it's going well, and hopefully a top pick from Brooklyn in this year's draft will set him up even better for next season.
And Mitch, any scores to bring us
now?
Yeah,
so at the moment it's half-time in the Rockets-Spurs game. Rockets comfortably leading 69-39. James Harden with 16.7 assists. And in the earlier game, Cavs ran out 116-105 victors. LeBron with 35-10-4.
Obviously that week-long break that they've got is going to help them going into the stretch of that series. Guys, now to the A League. We've got to have another big blue final with Melbourne Victory and Melbourne Victory and Sydney FC both winning their semi-final clashes. Guys, they were great matches, but they came with a bit of controversy.
Yeah, the video after replay has only been used once. It was introduced this year, late into the year, matter of fact. It was used once, I think, in round 26, I believe, and was used twice on Saturday night's game between Sydney and Perth. Bit of controversy, absolutely. Both goals originally called no goal, and Simon Green, I think it was the referee, decided to go to the video replay, overturning both and giving them a 3-0 lead. One of them bringing in a bit of dispute, as most people saw it as offside. But the second goal was rightfully used, and a lot of fans are now torn between if video replay is best, seeming that they're not even getting it perfectly right at the moment. But I think it's the way to go, and I think it will be brought into the Russian World Cup, which will be good to see, and on more of a global stage. And then I think people eventually by then will have a greater understanding. But certainly a bit of debacle following Saturday night's game. But I think you take those goals out, I think Sydney still dominated.
Oh yeah, I think they were the best team in the league this season, and I think Victory will give them a good run for their money. I thought if there was one of the teams that would have knocked Sydney off, Perth would have been close. They had the scoring power. But I think Victory will take it right up to Sydney in Sydney. I'm hoping for a Victory win. But I don't think anyone can really get past Sydney at the moment.
Yeah, Sydney have been the dominant team all year. Mitch, who are you backing going into that game?
Sydney have only lost the one game for the season. I think it's going to stay that way. I think they're too strong throughout. Last night's Dolan Warren Awards, Milos Ninkovic took out the Johnny Warren medal ahead of Diego Castro and Nicolas Martinez, and as well as Vukovic taking out the goalkeeping position, and Graham Arnold deservingly taking out the Coach of the Year award.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Mitch.
No worries.
We'll be back next week for more sport. And
Thanks,
next up, we have the show with Kate and Leandro, where they talk about the new Fast and Furious movie, as well as the controversial new Netflix series, Dear White People.
Hi, my name's Kate.
And I'm Leandro Luminok.
And this is the Showreel. This week we saw Fate of the Furious, the 8th film in the action franchise.
right, team, listen up. This crew is about family, but the game has changed now.
The movie is totally ridiculous. It's almost 3 hours long, and it's so unrealistic, but I really liked it. I thought it was good. I think it's important when you watch a movie like Fast and Furious that you know what kind of movie it's going to be. You're not going to go in there thinking it's going to be a movie with great writing and dialogue. Like, you should expect really good characters and action, and I think this movie really showed that. The cast is obviously really big. It's got a lot of stars in it. It's got Vin Diesel, The Rock, Jason Statham, Charlize Theron, Michelle Rodriguez, my favourite, Kurt Russell. And I think with so many characters it could get crowded and not a lot of characters get their time. They're like wasted. But I think the movie is really good at giving each character their moment. Like Tyrese Gibson's character, he's really good at the comedy aspect. Other characters are good at the action, stuff like that, and they all really work together. Of course, this is the 8th film, so they all really know each other and stuff, and I think it really works. I think The Rock maybe is the best part of the movie since he's coming, since the 5th film, I think it was. He's really energized the series and made it something more than it used to be. Yeah, and that's what I thought about it. What did you think?
Yeah, I really liked the movie as well. I think if it's something that you can just turn your brain off and just watch.
Yeah.
And like it's sort of like a popcorn flick. And I like how these movies have been like completely a total 180 to the first movies. Did you see the first movies?
Yeah.
Where they have these characters that have suddenly developed all these like skills, which is a little bit ridiculous, but I think this film knows that it's so ridiculous that it's really fun to watch. I think, yeah, I agree with the performances. The performances were also really good. And yeah, some of the parts were a little bit slow, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But once the action picked up, it was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, it is a long movie. I think it's 2 hours, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Some of that could have
it
been
definitely
cut
feels
down,
like that. So
that's a good time. Out of 10, I'd give the movie a 7. What would you give it?
I give it a 7 as well. So
Yeah.
I agree with you there.
So definitely check it out.
Yep. This week, Netflix is also releasing a new TV show called Dear White People, and here's a clip.
We need to come together at times like this.
When are you gonna wake up to your white privilege, man?
I'm black.
Sorry, brother. Thanks for calling.
The show takes place on a college campus in America and is about a student who has a radio show called Dear White People. The TV show is based on a film with the same name and has caused a lot of controversy. Controversy was by a trailer featuring white people in blackface, with many suggesting that the show is racist against white people. What did you think of the controversy?
I didn't get to see the movie, which is the show's about, so I don't have to know too much about the show and what's it going to be about. But I did see the trailer, and I saw that there were actually twice as many dislikes on the trailer than likes, so that's pretty interesting. So, I mean, I think the controversy is warranted, but I don't think it should be too taken seriously because the show is a satire, and it's more on comedic turn on what the black people think about white people. So yeah, I think the controversy is warranted to some extent, but I don't think it's warranted too much. What did you think about the show?
Yeah, I thought the controversy was a little overblown just because people are assuming this from a 30-second trailer they saw. They don't really know anything about the show or what context this is being presented in. And again, as you said, the show is a satire, so it's not being completely serious when it's showing you these things. But I can understand why some people may be offended by it or not want to watch the show, but that's just my opinion. I think maybe if you think it might be an interesting show, you can check it out. It's now streaming on Netflix. But if you're not ready to commit to the series fully, maybe check out the movie.
Thanks for watching. I'm Leandro Luminog.
I'm Kate McDonald.
And this has been The Show Reel.
And obviously, Fate and the Furious is something I definitely want to see. Have you watched any of the movies? Or
No, I haven't seen. I didn't even see 7, so I really have to get back onto the Fast and Furious bandwagon. I really liked. I thought 5 was an incredible movie and 6 was really good, but I didn't get around to seeing 7, so I'll do that and then go and see 8.
Yep, very well. And that's all we've got time for today on The Showdown. Thank you for joining us. And make sure you please follow us on Twitter at @theshowdown_LTU for more.
Coming up next is 1300 with Georgie and Emily. They'll be talking about the introduction of a safe injecting space and I think much more. So I'm Jarrod Gardner.
And I'm Peter Bonadio. Thanks for joining us.